Yeah,
Yes, Beer Money America, we're still online here. What's going on, John?
not a whole lot. Good to see you again.
Yep,
Hopefully
yep.
we can recover from, last week.
Yeah, right. Technology is our friend, right? It's like
Oh yeah.
when it works, it makes a world of difference. But man, towards the end, we were having some trouble there. So at some point there'll definitely be some blooper reels coming out for that one.
Yeah, but it's all good. As they say, this shows, basically about having a casual conversation, and say sometimes in the middle of a conversation, things come up. It's the way it
And it
is.
gets real casual,
Yeah, yeah. In
right?
my case, it becomes sort of a soliloquy, so it was a little bit interesting there at the end last time.
Yeah. So, anyways, one thing that I was thinking about, getting back to our on topic here a little bit, is with the California primaries this past week. Um, it actually again was a small sliver of hope in a way because we have these jungle primaries where the top two get to
Hmm.
go to the general. Um, the the fact that there were that many strong candidates, of course, Republican
Yeah,
and Democrat, it proved the theory how important it is to have more than basically two candidates, right? I mean,
yeah,
that or having the divided up. Here's you can only vote for Democrats here, and you can only vote for Republicans here. It was fascinating because I was sure that was going to end up, and there was going to be two Democrats running
hmm,
for the general election. And it ended up, hey, we got one Democrat and one Republican.
yeah,
And while I still don't have a whole lot of hope the Republican's going to go very far,
yeah,
um, at least it proved the theory, right? In my mind, that's why you need more quality candidates.
yeah. Well, as I say, I'm all for the quality candidates. We kind of in a sense got sort of the status quo result in that
Oh
we have
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
Republican and a Democrat.
yeah.
But I actually thought the single most interesting thing about the whole primary process here in California this time around for the Senate was the advertising. The
Oh yeah,
only advertising I heard for anything were like pro Garvey, pro the Steve Garvey, the Republican,
right,
pro Garvey ads run by Adam Schiff to push
right,
him ahead of Katie Porter,
right.
and ads for another Republican who was running, who was basically unknown, and I don't actually even remember what his name was, but they were being run by Katie Porter with the obvious intent that if they could split the Republican vote, then Garvey would fall behind Porter, and you'd get Porter and Schiff. So it was fascinating. The only commercials I heard anywhere
Yep.
were pro Republican commercials. That's it, because the Democrats were running pro Republican commercials and the Republicans were running pro Republican commercials.
I
It
know.
was insane. It was crazy.
Well, and it just goes back to the whole point that we're no longer having discussions about policies. It's just,
None.
hey, just support my tribe,
Yeah.
and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, and I mean, I guess if I was in their position, I understand the theory behind it, but
Yeah. It made
it,
sense.
it does. But at the same time, it's like, all the more reason you have to have at least three strong parties where you actually start getting into the policy differences because now it's
Right.
just like who can destroy who, not based on policies, just on tribalism.
Right. Because
So
now that we
it's
do have the
exactly
Republican versus, it's going to be Schiff versus Garvey, and now that we do have that,
right.
there's just going to be an avalanche of anti Steve Garvey commercials put out by Schiff,
Oh
and
yeah,
that's the only thing
yeah,
you'll hear about, because Schiff
yeah,
is
yeah. Well,
yeah.
and all of Schiff's stuff's going to be he voted for Trump twice. He voted for Trump twice. It's
That's all
like
you're going to hear. That's
that's
it.
all you're going to hear.
That's his entire
You know?
campaign. Because honestly,
Yeah.
Schiff has can't run on anything. I mean, he's just I mean, I'm a little bit forgiving for some politicians and things, but Schiff is just garbage. He is an absolute just inveterate liar. I mean, just he is horrendous.
Yeah.
I have to admit, as someone who's basically been a lifelong conservative and generally vote Republican or conservative, but mostly third party stuff because I've always been third party. but I
Right.
voted for Katie Porter because
Right.
I wanted to see the race come down to Schiff and Porter. Because again, it's too easy for Schiff to just blackball the Republican and cruise in. But if you'd had a Katie Porter and Adam Schiff, then all the people who understand that Adam Schiff is just absolute scum could vote for Porter, and you
So,
might have had a more interesting race.
so when you were up in, was Schiff your representative when you were living up north?
Was he my representative in LA? No, it
No.
was the person who's now the mayor of Los Angeles, and I
Oh,
can't
yeah,
remember.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Bob,
I'm trying to remember the name off the top of my
starts
head,
with
and
a
I can't.
B. Starts with a B.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
so now she's the mayor. But no,
yeah, yeah.
Schiff was more like, what was he?
He's more like Katie Porter's more like Orange County, kind of
Yeah,
upper
she
Orange
was Orange
County, maybe,
County, and
and some
Schiff was more
LA.
like,
He's like
what?
um, he's like Hollywood and
Yeah,
West Hollywood and
yeah. Because
maybe
we were,
inner.
I
Yeah,
was my district was West LA, so it kind of
yeah,
encompassed like just that very small little part,
yeah,
And so he was
yeah,
more like Hollywood Hills and stuff. Yeah,
yeah. Right, right, right. So yeah. Anyway, so uh, and I again, I just it was just goes to show, how sad it's become, and you can kind of look at a lot of the races across the country during the Super Tuesday thing, and they were all kind of the same thing. It was just
yeah,
mostly tribalism. I mean, other than you heard abortion pop up here and there, and that was a big issue for in some places. For the
yeah.
most part, during this last couple weeks, I mean, I didn't really hear a whole lot of policy discussion at all from anybody other than this person's bad because they are on Trump's side, or this person's bad because they're on the socialist Biden side.
Right. And that's all you're going to hear. I mean, it's not going to hear anything other than that.
Yeah.
The one thing that did happen though that I got an absolute kick out of that I thought was hilarious was, did you hear about the result for the Democrat primary in American Samoa?
Yes. That's pretty amazing. That hasn't
It's just,
happened in however many years, right?
yeah, but that was
Yeah.
hilarious because I mean, apparently, and I'm just sort of I've just looked at a few things for it, so I mean I don't know how accurate this actually is, but apparently the entire number of votes that was cast in American Samoa was 90. There were only 90
Really?
votes in the whole primary, and so the
Wow.
guy that won, whose name I can't even remember,
Right.
got 50 out of the 90 because he ran some sort of virtual campaign and just convinced 50 people to vote for him, and that was all he needed. And so he took a primary, so he's actually going to get delegates at the Democrat convention for winning American Samoa. That was great. Whoever
Yeah.
he is,
More
kudos to
power to
him.
them.
And I actually looked at it as kind of like a positive thing because I mean, think about that. I mean, you're talking about winning a primary,
Yeah.
and all he never even went to American Samoa to campaign.
No.
He only got something like 50 votes, but he won a primary. That's actually a thing.
Yeah.
And so, if you actually had a better organized third party, you would think you could start doing a lot of things of that nature.
Well, and that is again trying to find the silver linings and all these things.
Yeah,
Like when you look at Michigan and Minnesota, how I mean, both were in the 15 to 20% range of uncommitted
yeah.
voters
I mean,
for on the Democrat side.
right.
And so that's a huge amount of people.
Yeah, but if you took the Haley voters and the
Yep.
uncommitted voters and you put them all together, you'd be looking at like
They're competitive.
30% of the vote or something like that. I
Yeah.
mean, if you had a third party candidate getting 30% of the vote, that would be
Yeah. They'd be
unbelievable.
competitive.
Yeah, very competitive because you figure the remaining 70%, 35 and 35 are broken up, on the other
Yeah.
two candidates, and that's a close race.
Well, and a lot of those are just voting because I hear this all the time. I'm a Democrat and I'm not real happy with Biden, but I'm not going to vote for Trump. So, but if they had an option and vice versa, same way with
Yeah,
Trump voters, right? There's people that are Republicans that, well, I guess I just can't vote for a Democrat. So
right.
I'm going to vote for Trump.
But
So
so
there's
many
a
people,
lot of those. Those are a
yeah.
lot of them on both sides.
And so many people just, vote for the lesser of two evils. But if you could
Right.
actually present something that could, and you wouldn't even have to say that, your party necessarily appeals to all of those people, but just,
No.
some percentage of the voting of lesser for two evils that would give them something actually positive to vote for. I mean, that's a potential really large number of people. So
Yep.
again, if there can be a coalition and a consolidation of people under one banner,
Yeah.
that one banner definitely has the potential to be the biggest tent, of anything. And so
Yeah.
there's positives out there, but it's a matter of, organization and sort of finding a way to get it to work.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, for us in California, particularly on the Democrat side, this coming election is the perfect time to again register your dissatisfaction, because obviously not everybody that's a Democrat's going to be is going to register a protest vote, right?
Right.
But I will. And it's like, hey, again, it's like if you go back to um, those Michigan and Minnesota things,
Yeah.
if it comes out and 15% of the people, 20% here in California vote uncommitted or some kind of third party,
Yeah.
that sends a message for hopefully the next go round, right?
Yeah.
That
And that's sort of,
you have to
again,
accept.
why I come back to RFK Jr. It's like, again, I've said this before, that I don't
Right.
necessarily agree with all of his policies, but at least it's a visible
Yep.
entity. It is neither the
Absolutely.
Republicans or Democrats. So if you could coalesce around that, even just
Yep.
as a demonstration of the number of dissatisfied people,
Exactly.
it's like an emblem. It creates an image. It's like, wait a minute, look, the 30% of the vote went to RFK Jr. That
Yep.
that's a political party. Now we
Totally.
got to find policies that people can get behind, give it a name, and you've got 30% of the people in the country
Yep.
wanting to support something that's different. But again,
Yeah.
that's where the trick is.
Totally. Yeah. And I don't know where he's at as far as getting on all the ballots. I know there's a lot of efforts going on.
Yeah, that's
Um,
really a trick.
it's not easy. It's just not
Yeah,
easy.
but if
But
he did,
that should, but that shouldn't, again, you can always write in his name,
right?
even if he's not on the ballot, right?
Yeah,
So, that's a
and I
good
think
point.
as far as something in California to do, that I would encourage people to do that, because I mean, again, you can only look at what the options are that are out there, and
Right.
so because he's a visible name, if you want to see something different, if you want to see something change, and I get we don't necessarily agree with it, like the whole vax thing that most people don't
Yeah.
agree with,
Yeah.
and I understand that,
Yep.
but it's like, let's make a demonstration of what potential is out there. Because if you can make a demonstration of what's out there, then people start looking at it and say, let's seize this opportunity. And maybe some people with money, influence, experience, campaign builders can come in and say, look, there is this huge opportunity. We just saw it.
Yep.
RFK gets 30% of the vote. you
Yep.
know that can drive things in a better direction, even if you don't love the candidate, even if you don't love his particular
Right.
viewpoint on things, you can drive the needle in the right direction by getting on board with something like that. So
Yeah.
again, you're not going to get the guy elected to president this time around, but you can start changing the political landscape,
Yep.
and that's a big move in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a long time. I mean, none of these things happen overnight. I mean,
Right.
this is one big country,
Yeah.
so,
And-
but you got to start somewhere. And
yeah.
every political party's always started in the same boat,
Yeah.
slowly but surely. You just
Yeah.
kind of build it up.
And I've written I've asked for an advisory letter from the FEC to help me start my political party. But on the trajectory that my political party is going, it does not look like it will be ready for this election. I'm sad to say.
Darn,
Yeah, I was just this
just that
close.
close, right? Well, hey, again, it's a process, right? So, we'll be having another one in 2 years for at least for the representatives. So
Yeah.
who knows? And anyways, um, well, I had one other thought on the policy side of things for a third party, and I don't really quite know where I fall on this actually, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is on the Supreme Court, because there's everybody on both sides, depending on what the issue is, everybody's complaining that the Supreme Court has become politicized, which
Mm.
I think it's always been politicized, obviously, because
Yeah.
just it's like, well, it's always been really it's a political appointment in essence.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
and while maybe there was a little more decorum in past times, I mean, everybody always said, well, this is a conservative court, this is the Reagan court, or this is the Obama court, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's always been politicized. But to that point, um, I do think there should be some discussion, and maybe it's another good point for a third party to get involved in, is does it make sense to expand the number of people on the Supreme Court only for the respect of it helps mitigate these wild swings going back and forth in terms of, okay, now there's a majority of conservatives today. There's been a majority of liberals for decades before
Mhm.
this.
Yeah.
And so and you kind of think about, it's like that's an amazing amount of power 9 people have,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so if there's, and I don't know what the magic number is, but at the time, and I know the court numbers have ebbed and flow over history. I mean, I think
Right.
we've been
I was going to
down
make
as,
that point actually. It
yeah.
hasn't always been 9.
No, and it's been much smaller, and it's been a little larger, and so there's some precedence for having a different number. It just
Yeah.
seems like if you're going from, when the whole Constitution was created, I don't know how many people did we have back then. 20 million, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know. Really small, and now
Small.
we're at 340, 50 million, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, it seems like we should scale up the court in some way, shape, or form, just to try and level, and so we don't have these big swings. Because it only takes one now, right? You
Mm.
you add one justice, and you can skew the whole court depending
Right.
on what's happening at that time. And it's like, well, if there was, and again, I don't know what the number is, if it's 12 or 20 or whatever, just so you kind of level these things out, where maybe again you get people to, okay, what is the greater good here?
Yeah. Well, my thing is that I don't think the actual number of justices on the court really particularly matters. I mean, I think you would like to see a spread of nominees over the course of many administrations, so that you have many
Yeah.
different presidents um, appointing justices to the court. So, in a sense, if you expanded the number of people on the court, it would give a greater opportunity for more different presidents to put people onto the court, which would, in theory, have like a more of a diversity of um, ideas within the
Right.
court, so that get kind of a more diverse and less purely one ideological sort of
Right.
side from things for the court. But at the same time, I think if you start talking about like increasing the number of people on the court, you're going to get in one of these tit for tat things where one person increases it to put their political cronies on, and then the next person comes along and expands it to put their political cronies on. I think that is potentially like, I don't know. I just see it as being problematic generally. It's been 9 for so long
Mm-hmm.
that, and the whole thing about FDR, trying to expand the courts, it sort of put a taboo on it. So I think that's kind of a difficult argument to make. I don't know that I would really go that way, because honestly, I think it all comes down to reverence for the law. I think that
Right.
I think the laws are only as good as the people that enforce them. So one of the things that keeps coming up with Biden lately, is the whole thing about immigration and the status of immigration. So the Biden administration has been saying, we need Congress to pass laws so that we can get control of the border. And then the Republicans come out and say, there's all these laws that you're not even enforcing. So, I mean, if
Right.
you don't care about enforcing the law, what good does it do to, you know, put more laws on the books that you're just not going to enforce? It doesn't make any sense. And then, gun control a lot of the time comes down to the same kind of things. It's like, Well, if the person who went out and murdered somebody is willing to break the laws, if we pass a whole bunch more laws, well, I mean, he didn't care about the first laws. Why is he going to care about the second one?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the only way our system works is that if the various branches of government sort of stay in their lanes, at least that's sort of my feeling on it. The idea of the Supreme Court is that they are there to interpret the laws that have been written and, by Congress and, signed into the law by the president. So, the executive branch is enforcement, the legislative branch is, running the laws, and then the judicial branch is the interpretation of the law. And it's like, if the Supreme Court just doesn't care about the law and how it's written and what they're doing, then, you could have one person, you could have 20 people. It's not going to
Right.
matter because they don't care.
Yeah.
So, as far as like bias within in the Supreme Court, as long as it's a political appointee, you know,
That's
it
hard.
was yeah, it's hard because again, it goes back to things like the news media. The news media was supposed to be above all of the biases, and they're straight, they're just reporting the facts, and
Right.
but I mean that's
That's long
nonsense.
gone.
Yeah, it's a complete nonsense. So I mean, the justices on the court have their ideological bents. Um,
Well,
there's a
they're human. I mean,
right,
that's the reality of it, right? Yeah. I mean, the only other option that is ever bannered about that, again, maybe is deserving of some discussion is term limits, and you could say
yeah,
that for Congress as well.
yeah,
I mean, we have term limits basically for the president. Why, that's the other area for both, not only the court, but for senators and representatives and all of that. It just seems that's something that needs to be truly discussed, I think, because it's
yeah,
people have made such a career of it, and it's like McConnell, just now finally saying, okay, I'm done leading, and how long has he been there? 35, 40 years or
yeah,
whatever. It's like, and he's, it's just a lot. It's just a lot of power to put in somebody's hands for an unlimited amount of time.
yeah. I generally kind of am a person who's in favor of term limits because I think that things do change
Yep,
generally, uh, generationally, and so
totally.
it's like if you have somebody who's been in a position, for 30, 40 years, there's just almost no way that they're really in tune with what is the reality of the particular situation that's going
Yep,
on now. I mean, they're essentially a dinosaur. They're a creature of the past. They're an anachronism. And the thing is, it's like that's sort of bad on its own level. But the other thing that personally, as a small government person, one of the things that I hate are career politicians.
right.
Like, as a business owner, I'm dealing with things that the city is telling me and doing whatever, and you have people that you come in contact with that are just there being elected to do whatever. And they have no concept of the difficulties they're creating
Yeah,
for the population in a whole, because in a sense they're not part of the population anymore. They're insulated from everything because they have this sort of like world of infinite resources that just keeps paying them to do whatever. They're doing something really good, doing something really bad. It almost doesn't matter to them because they're just
yeah,
getting whatever government salary or whatever kickbacks they can manage. So it's like career politicians.
right,
I think that they're generally bad because they're too myopic. They don't
right.
they don't have to suffer the consequences of their actions.
Well, particularly with in the House, where it just drives me nuts, um, because, and again, you can't totally fault anybody that's in that position, but having to run every 2 years, you never stop campaigning, and
Yeah,
so it's like, you know, they do all these reports all the time about how much time the typical house member spends just fundraising
yeah, it's
because
crazy.
they win one election and they just have to jump right in and start on the next one because 2 years goes by in a flash.
Yeah,
And that's another one I just doesn't make any sense to me. And at the time, it probably made sense when it was crafted because life was different, right?
Yeah.
But now it's like, I mean, and you could still put them on a rotational basis, just say
Mhm.
they do with the Senate. So you're not electing all representatives every 4 years, stagger them, but do it every 4 years, not every 2 years. It's like, but then limit
Mhm.
it. Hey,
Yeah.
you got you can you know have 3, 4 terms, whatever, but they're longer, and so you get time to get more. Because I get it; it takes a while to just get grounded
Yeah.
and
Figure out what's
and
going on.
the institutional knowledge that comes with it and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, after man, if you can't get a lot of stuff done in 16 or 20 years, you probably should move on.
But I also, but again, I still come back to the idea of having to go back out into the private sector at some
Yeah.
point. If you're passing a bunch of bad laws that's crippling the private sector,
Yep.
then you have to leave your cushy spot in whatever government agency you have.
Yep.
Well, now maybe you've done some damage to yourself, and maybe you would think of things a little bit differently if you had to face the realities that so many other people are forced,
Yep. No,
to deal with.
absolutely.
So, I mean, I kind of I like term limits, generally speaking, and I would
Right.
probably be in favor of term limits for the Supreme Court. But of
Yeah.
course, just to play devil's advocate and give the counter argument, the idea behind
Yeah.
the lifetime appointment for Supreme Court justices is that they theoretically are fearless and are able to act in a way that is responsible without having to fear repercussions
Right.
for whatever it is that they're voting on. They can act solely to uphold the purity of the law. But I mean, and then to go switch back to the other side, do they do that? I don't know that they really do that anyway.
Well, and I don't think it would change. I mean, assuming that say their term limit was 20 years,
Mhm.
what throwing out a number. I mean, as long as they have the same protection that hey, you are named to a 20-year term, that
Right.
whole fearless piece of it, I would think still, again, so you're going to have more than your share of big decisions to make in 20 years,
Yeah.
right? But at that point, you're done. Thank you for your service,
Yeah. Time to move on.
So,
Yeah. And I
I
think
mean,
also, it would in a way give people a lot of things to think about as far as how they do vote, because like you would know when somebody's term was up and you'd be like, okay, whoever we elect a president this go round will pick the replacement for this seat. And that
yep,
could matter. That could matter a lot. So,
totally,
yeah.
totally. Yeah. Because then, and plus, you just don't get into these kind of weird situations like with like Ruth Bader Ginsburg trying to hang in there, even though
Yeah, that
and then that totally backfired on the Democrats, right? And that's what
yeah.
they're saying about Thomas right now, that he wants to retire, right?
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to retire during a Democrat presidency,
Yeah, presidency, yeah.
and so that's not healthy either,
Right. Yeah.
and that's not going to change, So it's like I don't know. I think the whole term limits thing may be the way to go, and maybe the numbers thing. I mean, I can go back and forth on that one. But term limits across the board, I just think make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Whether
I
it's
generally agree with that too.
with
But I mean, the comment about Thomas wanting to retire while there's a Republican administration, I mean, in a sense, that tells you all you need to know about whether or not the court
exactly,
is or is not politicized. I mean, of course it is.
exactly,
And as they
and
say,
and
you
and
have to
since
accept that.
yeah, and since the again, and the other thing that reflected on that is that the fact that so Obama wasn't able to appoint another justice because McConnell held it up, right?
Yeah.
So it's obviously very politicized. I mean,
Yeah.
that whole, hey, here's the decorum we're going to follow just went out the window uh, back then in
Yeah.
Obama's administration.
But I
It's
will
changed
say
everything.
that there's, the most recent ruling from the court was unanimous.
Yep.
And it tossed out the idea that the states were going to more or less
Right.
willy-nilly decide who is and
Right.
isn't on the ballot. So in some senses, I think that the members of the court do have their political biases. But before we criticize the court for any particular thing, I think it is worth looking at the actual decisions that are actually coming out and, you know, what are their merits? I know in the past I've actually read Supreme Court decisions, and honestly, a lot of the time they're pretty good and they do get it
Oh
right
yeah,
on a lot
yeah.
of things.
Well, and on this one, the Colorado thing, I mean, I just didn't see how they were going to rule any other way than that because
No,
I
it
mean,
was crazy.
if you allowed that to go on, talk about chaos.
Oh
It
no.
was just going to be like, okay, now it's a free for all. We're going to just determine who's going to be on our ballots, and the blue states are not. They're going to come up with some silly reason to not allow a Republican, and vice versa. Whatever.
Oh yeah,
Texas will figure out some reason not to put a Democrat on. So I
exactly.
mean, it just not. I just couldn't imagine them. Well, and I understand the whole state's role in elections and all
Yeah.
that theory that they were putting behind it, but that's always has to be in balance with okay, these are federal
Elections,
elections.
exactly.
And so the whole point of it is to make sure that whole states' rights and looking for the greater good, we are the United States,
Mhm.
is protected. So that one didn't surprise. I don't think it really surprised anybody a whole lot, but it was the
But
right
also,
decision, I think.
I'd also say that if you look at the people um, who are saying that, the court is really biased and we need to have more people on the court, a lot of those same people were the ones saying that the Colorado decision was, warranted and that the, Supreme Court should uphold that. And so I think there's a lot of people who just have, a dog in the fight, who want
Yeah,
their people on the court. And that is the worst possible reason, I think, to expand the number of people on the court. Because again, one side does it, then the other side does it,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
doesn't make any sense. I
yeah.
think that for our new political party, judicial philosophy, I think, is an extraordinarily important um, piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
One of the things that Trump did that was popular when he was running the first time was he published a list of the people that he was going to choose
Hmm.
from to elect to Supreme Court decisions. Now, again, if you're a Democrat, you probably didn't like any of the people he picked.
Right.
But the reason he did that was to demonstrate here is sort of my philosophy on things, and these are the type of people I'll be, putting on the court.
Right.
And so I actually think that if we do come up with a party, judicial philosophy, and possibly even giving examples of people that we thought have or are currently good justices
Yep.
is something that should be an important part of the party
Yep.
because like you said at the very beginning of this discussion, the Supreme Court is extremely powerful. They have, they
Crazy.
have the last say on a lot of things. And so, you have to that's essentially something you have to get right. Because if it really does go down the rabbit hole of, you know, the courts just sort of making law and sort of
Right.
deciding what everyone is going to have to do, well, I mean, you've pretty well
That's bad. Yeah.
yeah, you've pretty well screwed yourself at that point.
Oh yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. So good. Okay, cool. Well, I think we better wrap this up and but that's good. I think we got something there anyways for the new party that at least let's at least think about term limits as a way to try and sort of
Yeah.
bring some more fairness to the court system and and to your point, which I think is equally as important, is making sure that we have kind of that generational rollover that
Yeah.
is, I think, really needed, not only in judicial, but in Congress as well, because,
Yeah.
you know, I think it would really, really help. And we start bringing in, more of the best and the brightest. Right now we're just whoever got money or whoever's got some pull, it's not necessarily the best and brightest people. And that's
Yeah.
on both sides, you know and so I think would help incent trying to get people that I think could really make a huge difference to get involved.
And one more thing I'll just add here right at the end is the power of the incumbency is very great. And so
Yep.
part of what I think happens is that, you get into office, now you're the incumbent and you understand that the odds of me getting reelected are just vast.
Yep.
Why do I have to care about what anyone says, does, wants? It doesn't matter anymore because now that I'm the incumbent, I just flex the power of the incumbency,
Oh,
my ability to spend, to campaign, name recognition, and I just get myself reelected over and over again, and I squeeze out anyone else who's got good ideas. But if you put term limits on that, then at some point the power of the incumbency gets tossed aside, and you have an
absolutely.
actual election. And so that's another reason I think that it's worthwhile to think
Yep.
about term limits.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Great point. All right. Well, we'll leave it there for now, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Great, good to see you again. Have a great
Yep.
week. Stay dry.
Yep. You too.
All right,
Talk to you in a bit.
see you soon.
Bye.